Good afternoon, class. Before we begin this week's class on behavioral and social learning, you'll find several things on your desk. First is a card with 4 statements printed on it about today's subject. Also, there's a sheet of paper. Before we begin, please indicate on this sheet whether you agree or disagree with each of the statements. This is for me to assess your knowledge of the topic before and after we cover it. No names are necessary. I just put the date and hold these until the end of the week, and then we'll fill in your agreement or disagreement after the section is over. The third thing you'll find is a small slip of paper with the beginning of a sentence on it. I'd be grateful if you would complete that sentence. It starts, "Something I learned today that I never knew before was blank." Please write today's date, and I'll collect these at the end of the class. Today's topic is on Pavlovian conditioning. Ivan Pavlov was born in Russia in the middle of the 19th century. He began theological schooling, but abandoned it to study science. He was greatly influenced by the ideas of Charles Darwin, and he took several degrees in natural science and physiology in St. Petersburg. He is best remembered for his experiments on the secretory activity of digestion in dogs. But prior to this phase of his scientific life, his research laid down the basic principles of the nervous and circulatory systems. He developed a technique to be able to observe continuously the functions of various organs. Previously, the only way to study the function of an organ was through vivisection, which required the sacrificing of the animal. This was quite inadequate because the procedure disrupted the normal interrelation between the organ and its environment. Pavlov's research opened the way for new advances in theoretical and practical medicine. He clearly demonstrated how the nervous system played the dominant part in regulating the digestive process. His discovery is the basis of modern physiology of digestion. His research also showed that a conditioned reflex was both physiological and psychological phenomena and was a clue to the highest developed forms of reactions in humans and animals to their environment. In 1904, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine. In Pavlov's experiment with dogs, he measured the animal's saliva production at different situations. He noticed, of course, that the saliva would increase when food was presented. This food is an unconditional stimulus, and the salivation is an unconditional response. Since no learning is involved, they are automatic. Pavlov's next experiment was ringing a bell when the food was presented. Once the dog had been trained to associate the sound of the bell with food, they would produce saliva, whether or not the food was presented. The bell is now the conditioned stimulus, and this proved that the dog's physical response, salivation, was directly related to the stimulus of the bell. Therefore, the salivation is a conditioned or learned response. The use of preceding conditions to alter behavioral reactions is called classical conditioning. Even though Pavlov worked closely with animals in most of his experiments, the fundamentals of classic conditioning has been examined in many different organisms, including humans. Classical conditioning sets the groundwork for present-day behavior modification practices. Pavlov's use of modifying stimuli to produce a certain response is much like teachers manipulating instructions and learning environments to produce positive behaviors or decrease undesired behaviors. The creation of a pleasant environment in the classroom can help the students overcome their anxieties and fears. For example, if we paired public speaking, which is anxiety-provoking, with pleasant surroundings, the student learns to associate public speaking with more positive feelings. Finally, wrap up to Pavlov's life. There's a couple small incidents that occurred early in his career. One was when he applied for a position of the head physiologist at the Moscow, or the Military Medical Academy in St. Petersburg. He was denied this position. Imagine their chagrin when several years later he came home with the Nobel Prize. And another little unknown fact about Pavlov was his wife lost their first baby through a miscarriage, and the stated reason at the time was that he walked so fast that she had to run to keep up with him, and that caused this loss of the child.